When you drive through the outskirts, there are wrecked cars everywhere, blown up, burned out.
You can only go there at night, only after 10 p.m. when it's dark, and again, only with the headlights off.
I've had calls more than once. They offered good money, 100, 150, even 200,000 rubles. We refused.
Yes, of course. Sometimes we do take those passengers. It happens. Though the prices there for sex workers are sky high, 20 to 25,000 per hour.
Trips across the new territories are calculated differently, 3 times more expensive than within Russia.
But no money is worth that. Until probably 2022, I worked as a Philips company representative. I worked here in Rostov at quite a few outlets, earned a pretty good living. Basically, let's say, I worked in sales. I'm more of a sales guy. I became a taxi driver in 2022, right after sanctions were imposed against the Russian Federation. So our company left the market, and I had to look for another job. I looked around. Either the salary was too low, or the schedule didn't fit, or you had to work 24/7 without rest. So I decided to go into taxi driving. Naturally, at first I worked as a regular city cab driver, through Yandex and other platforms. Then somehow, miraculously even, I don't remember how, I came across some Telegram groups for taxi orders. That's basically how it all started. In those groups, they started posting, let's say, non-standard orders. From the new territories, from the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics, from Zaporizhia region, to our territory, to Moscow, St. Petersburg, Ufa, and well, across Russia in general, for quite decent money. And why not? Roughly speaking, the profit per trip could reach up to 70,000 rubles net. That's already clear profit, after all commissions, expenses, and everything else. That's quite a good income for an average taxi driver. In fact, even for a city cab driver who works 12 hours a day every day, that's a very good sum. It's more than what he'd usually make in a week. You could make that in a single day, basically. That's probably why I went into it.
I've been working in taxi service for about 8 years. I've been driving for 12 years. Before that, I worked as a loader and as an operator on various machines. The first time I went to the new territories was in early 2023. It was the city of Mariupol. At first, I was still working through Yandex. It was a bit creepy in Mariupol. I knew there was a war going on, but they told me it was calm there. So I went. We drove out. There were very few civilians, mostly just military, and the city was completely destroyed. The first few times I got calls to the new territories through Yandex. The passengers going to Mariupol and Donetsk were soldiers. They needed to pick up their leave pay. They promised that they'd have me take them back as well, but something didn't work out, and they stayed there. Honestly, it was scary driving back, without navigation, without internet, not knowing the city, knowing nothing at all. It was scary the first time. Another problem was that back then, in 2023, we spent a very long time at the checkpoints. I got stuck for 6 hours. I told myself, never again. But about a month later, I went to Donetsk. In Donetsk, it was eerie in a different way. You could hear something firing in the distance. And at first, it was unsettling. Now we've basically gotten used to those moments. When something goes boom nearby, you more or less take it in stride.
My very first trip was probably the simplest one. I remember it clearly. From Rostov-on-Don to Antratsit, in the Luhansk People's Republic. I had to pick up a soldier's wife at the train station, meet her, help with her luggage, and drive her there. The distance wasn't that long, about 180 kilometers, and it was relatively quiet there. There hadn't been any fighting since 2014. But overall, the city felt very bleak. It's old, so to speak. How to describe it? A city that probably hasn't seen repairs since the time it was founded. There were practically no roads left. All of them were broken. But overall, the trip went quite well, and everyone was satisfied.
Через 300 метров держитесь двух левых полос, а затем поверните налево.
Well, I've made various trips. For example, I once drove a passenger to Zaporizhia region. You drive there, and on the outskirts, you see wrecked cars, blown up, burned out. I dropped him off, and he told me, "You'd better leave right away. Drones fly here sometimes. There are strikes. I personally haven't gone anywhere near the Dnipro riverbank. It's very dangerous there. Here, it's still more or less okay. Not as bad. Well, let's say trips to the new territories are priced differently. Roughly speaking, they cost 3 times more than in Russia. If I calculate a trip within Russia, I count up to a certain checkpoint nearby, and from that checkpoint, I calculate differently. Roughly speaking, up to Donetsk or Mariupol. The price to the city and the new territories where the passenger needs to go is already higher. A trip from Moscow to Donetsk costs, depending on the exact destination, an average of 45,000 rubles plus tolls for a passenger car. Rostov to Mariupol costs 9,000 per trip. My longest trips personally were about 2,000 kilometers.
Yes, that's near Kherson. There are places like that. Oleshki, that's right next to Kherson. Taxi drivers won't go there even for 200,000 rubles for 100 kilometers. Cars are burned there most often. It's, let's say, very dangerous, both day and night. At night, they even recommend driving without headlights. But how can you drive without headlights if, roughly speaking, many cars only have daytime running lights that can't be turned off? So no one wants to go there, no matter how much money is offered. It's dangerous there too. First of all, there are no roads. These are recently liberated areas, and there are no roads at all. Second, it's very dangerous. There are drones, artillery, helicopters, everything you can imagine. The whole 9 yards, right up to sabotage and reconnaissance groups roaming around. So no one really wants to go there. The toughest trip I had was, roughly speaking, about 5 months ago. It was near Popasna, a city that's basically gone, nothing left but ruins. It had been taken with heavy fighting and big losses. There's literally nothing there, and you can only enter with special passes. Regular taxi drivers can't get in. They're only allowed up to the checkpoint. Before, when people were still allowed in, 8 taxi drivers' cars could be burned in just 3 or 4 days. 7 or 8 cars simply blown up by drones. There was a case in Kherson region where a guy went to pick someone up near Berestov. Fighting was still going on there. I don't know what made him go. Somehow they let him through. He managed to get in, but he never made it out. The guys survived. They all managed to escape, but the car burned completely. I'm not going back there. No, I'm not going back there. No. You can go in there now. At this point, it's allowed. But I can only go there at night. Only after 10 p.m., when it's dark, again. Only with the headlights off. And you really need to know the roads well, because if you turn left or right in the wrong place, most of the area still hasn't been cleared of mines and you could just blow up. And back when I went there, things were even worse. The city had just been taken. The front line was about 10 kilometers from Bakhmut, and drones were flying like planes over Sheremetyevo, just everywhere. It was so full of them that even walking there was dangerous, let alone driving. So, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not setting foot there again. I won't go there for any amount of money. There are those who aren't afraid to go to really tough places, like Lisichansk, where something can hit you right in the middle of the city. Well, it all depends on, pardon the expression, whether you've got balls of steel. If you've got them, you'll go. If you don't, you won't. That's it. That's basically what it all comes down to.
I wouldn't say drivers come under fire often, but it does happen. Maybe I don't know all the news, but sometimes it happens. Last year, I heard that a drone hit a car. It completely burned it. Luckily, the driver managed to jump out in time. In winter, there was another case. A driver was injured and ended up in the hospital. And just recently, there was another drone strike from a Baba Yaga in Kherson region. The driver was seriously hurt, the car burned up, his arms and legs were burned. That driver was injured, It's still unclear what his condition is. It happened not long ago. Overall, well, they recover, of course, and return to work. I think no amount of money is worth that risk, honestly.
There were cases. For example, a friend of mine, near Tokmak not long ago, maybe about a month ago. There was a strike, his brother was there, and two cars were parked, waiting for passengers. One driver was killed, the other, his brother, survived. That's it. He's now in Rostov, still in the hospital recovering. But still, one dead, one wounded, two cars destroyed beyond repair. It was just a drone strike between the cars, that's all. Yes, they go back. They return to work after a long rehabilitation. Not all of them, of course. Maybe about 70% come back. Some say, no thanks, I'd rather drive for Yandex or other platforms than go there again. Of course, they're afraid. That fear is there. They try to stay as far away from those dangerous cities as possible, yet they still go. Because the pay is among the highest. Because, as they say, money decides everything. Where else can they go? Let's be realistic. The average salary of an intercity taxi driver, if he works well and doesn't mess up, is around 300 to 350,000 rubles a month. Where else can you make that kind of money? In the mines, for example, or in Rostov, or even in St. Petersburg. Where can you make 350,000 a month? Only if you're self-employed or have your own business. The average salary now. What is it in Rostov? Maybe 60 or 70,000. In St. Petersburg, probably a bit more, around 100,000 roughly. But there, it's 3.5 times higher.
I never drove to the front line myself, but still, sometimes things got interesting. Early on, when I had just started working, I happened to be not far from the front line. Take Donetsk, for example. The front line was nearby in the Petrovsky district. At the time, it was very dangerous. Local taxi drivers were afraid to go there. Back then, the front line was still in Marinka, near Donetsk. 20 or 30 kilometers away, that was normal. Same thing in the Zaporizhzhia region. Everything was close there too, about 20 to 30 kilometers. Mostly, it's still people taking part in the special military operation, meaning soldiers. 90% of them are military. Some others have joined them there, their sons, daughters, wives. Let's say there are a few more of them now. They've started going there since it got calmer. They rent apartments there, roughly speaking, for when their husbands are on leave, so they don't have to travel all the way home to, say, Krasnoyarsk. That would take 2 days. Instead, they come here and stay in Luhansk or Donetsk, wherever it's better. The number of civilians has probably increased by about 15 to 20% compared to previous years. Wives often come to visit their husbands to Donetsk, the Zaporizhzhia region, or the Luhansk region. Basically, they started traveling there from the very beginning of the special military operation. And sometimes, wives even go to places where drivers are afraid to go. Once, at the beginning of 2023, I picked up a woman. I had just started working then. I drove her back to Volgograd from the Donetsk region. She told me that there, as she put it, the birds are flying around, meaning drones, and it's scary. Yes, people also come with children, and that happens quite often. Once I had a woman from Vladivostok. She flew to Moscow, then took a train to Rostov, and from there I drove her to Donetsk. Usually those traveling with children go to calmer cities, in the rear, places that are relatively safe. They don't go to the front line with kids. Take Donetsk, for instance. In general, life goes on there, and the city is more or less peaceful. Yes, there are occasional strikes, of course, but overall it's a quiet city where people live and work. The same goes for many nearby towns where people still live. Take Avdiivka, for example. For now, only locals are allowed there. They're slowly starting to rebuild and settle again, but taxi drivers aren't allowed into Avdiivka itself, especially those looking for missing people. Some are ready to go all the way to the front line, and they ask us to take them, but we refuse those trips. Last year, a woman asked me to go to Robotine to look for her husband, but no one would go there. They simply wouldn't let anyone through the checkpoints.
Listen, first of all, they won't let you into such places. Even with a special pass, you won't get in. Where there's direct fighting, you simply can't drive through. You can't even get into Kremina. You'll end up some distance away, 5 or 6 kilometers from the line of contact. But you won't be allowed any closer. There are drivers who've gone in during the day, when it's quiet and calm. Most of the movement happens at night. So, I personally haven't had any close calls with drones. Ironically, but, you know, it's kind of exciting to run for your life sometimes. One of my guys in the Kherson region was chased by a drone around a store. He was driving a Kia Rio and kept circling the store to get away from it, until the drone got bored and flew off to look for another target. He was driving around like that for about half an hour.
Right now, the main passengers are military personnel. Many of these guys have probably gotten used to it. Some, of course, travel reluctantly, maybe returning from leave. When they go on leave, they hurry and often order taxis to get home quickly. But coming back from leave, they don't order taxis as often. They travel by train, make the trip on their own. There have been cases when they were returning to the special military operations zone, got to a certain point, and then asked to turn back because they were too scared to continue. I don't know what happens to them after that. But there have been cases where they asked to return. Passengers vary. Some stay silent. Others talk about the war, about what's going on. Some are eager to get back, while others want to escape it all and have it over with quickly. I've driven people who served in Wagner. They were pulled back in later, returning either through the Ministry of Defense or by signing contracts elsewhere. Others just want it all to end quickly and don't want to fight.
There have also been cases where military police picked up passengers. If someone was drunk, things got very strict. From what I've heard, they were immediately sent into assaults afterward. Lately, they've been drinking a lot. They ride in the car and get completely smashed. Seriously. They drink so much that they start feeling sick and even fight in the car. There are all kinds of situations, plenty of variations. But they don't want to talk about their service right now. They say, everything's fine, but they don't go into details, unfortunately. Rarely, very rarely, can you ask something and get an honest answer. At the moment, they avoid the details. They don't want to talk about it. Maybe it's too difficult, or they simply don't feel like it. You just can't tell.
There have been situations where drunk passengers are stopped at checkpoints, checked, found drunk, and my services are no longer needed. One case, I was driving a guy who was visibly tipsy. I said, "At least chew some gum or smoke a cigarette before we cross the border so there's no smell." He said, "I've got nothing to worry about. I'm already an assault soldier. I'd just like to be transferred somewhere else." I've also had female military personnel order rides. Once, I was driving someone. I got a message in Telegram, and I thought it was a guy. But then I see a woman in military uniform getting in. I asked her a few questions. She's serving under contract and likes it.
And the 500s would be deserters right every day in batches. Take us out, get us out, get us out. Honestly, it's a profitable business, but I don't do that, because sooner or later there would be some kind of responsibility for it. I don't need that. I'm doing fine, as it is. They write, I need to leave the country without documents, or I want to go home, I don't want to fight, and so on. They write directly, they're not ashamed of it.
I've had calls more than once. They offered good sums, but we refused. It's punishable. We would be liable if I smuggled someone out illegally, without leave papers, without a combat order, without travel orders. It's forbidden. Still, they ask and offer money, and the amounts on offer are higher. You can't do that. They offered 100, 150, and 200,000 rubles, but we refuse. So once I was driving a passenger, and he took with him a load-bearing vest, part of a bulletproof vest, and some uniform to wash at home. He literally, by accident, pulled a grenade out of his pocket. We were grilled at the checkpoint for 6.5 hours before we could leave. They called the security services, they searched the car, confiscated the grenade. They released him and me, but they held us for 6.5 hours, while they cataloged and confiscated everything. Wounded people also get into taxis. It often happens that after being wounded, they need to get to their unit to receive paperwork. It happens a lot. I had a passenger who was wounded. They had to amputate his foot, and he was there without a foot for another 6 months, maybe more. He was waiting to be discharged, but remained at the unit.
I have a regular client who, fortunately for him, is now demobilized. He lost a leg after stepping on a mine. He said he stepped on a mine while on a combat mission at night. He was placing a mine between our positions and the positions of the Ukrainians, and stepped on it. He said, "I only saw my leg fly by and then crawled back to our side." He told it like that. It actually sounds absurd. I laughed too, but it's not funny. There was an older man mobilized, maybe 65, almost 70. No, he wasn't mobilized. He was a volunteer. He went to fight. He went to fight with a cane. I asked him, "You, with a cane, where are you going to fight?" Sorry for saying this, but you should be at home raising your grandchildren. He's such a cheerful, kind man from Stavropol Krai, by the way. He still travels. We'll go pick him up, to be precise, on the 29th from Georgievsk in Stavropol Krai and take him to Horlivka. Overall, he's a good guy. I just can't understand. He's 65 years old. What is he doing there? Who is he fighting there? 65 years old at the front. Who is he fighting? It's puzzling to me. There's a lot about our army I don't understand. How it all works. Girls are a separate story. They transport them. Of course they do. If the guys want to rest, they spend 5 or 6 months in the trenches, so naturally, physical and chemical effects. Let's just say biology is unavoidable.
Sometimes there might be requests to transport prostitutes, but never to the trenches, of course. Some guys have called me, asking if there are girls available in Tokmak or Berdyansk. But that's not my business. I'm not interested. Still, I guess some people do it.
Yeah, we do transport them sometimes. It happens. The rates for sex workers are astronomical, around 20 to 25,000 per hour. That's expensive, even for the military. I'm not entirely sure, but I think even for them it's costly. In the past, they used to be brought almost directly to the deployment site. But over the last year and a half, those requests have stopped. Now it's mostly to an apartment, a location, or just in a car. The key point is, never to the front lines. That would be both wrong and dangerous. No amount of money is worth that.
We try to deliver humanitarian aid either free of charge or just for the cost of fuel. Not the full fare. Volunteers also transport aid. Sometimes people call and say they need humanitarian cargo moved from Moscow to Rostov, and someone goes. We try to make it cheap or do it for free when we can.
We met some people who asked for help, to bring things from Samara, for example. So we did. It took off from there. They got me a pass, and I drive and help. Of course, it's not always completely free. They pay something, though I won't say how much. It varies each time, but there's usually some payment. At that time, we also transported routers for the internet, Ethernet cable, various chips, and gadgets for drones. Those items are bought and packed elsewhere, handed to me, and I deliver them. Sometimes I buy things myself. but that's mostly light medical supplies or other items an ordinary person can buy. Most of what's needed at the front can't be bought easily. You need prescriptions or permits. There are a lot of nuances.
Yeah, it was just a matter of getting used to it. At first, everything was new. Now we're used to it. You could say it feels like coming home. Life is settling down, slowly getting organized. At first, when I arrived, I would try to leave immediately, not waiting for return orders. Maybe I was afraid of the danger or something else. Now, both I and other drivers can arrive and spend the night in the car or a hotel. Whatever works. Some go empty to the new territories to pick up an order, since there are more of them there than in Russia, and the pay is naturally better.
I used to worry, but after 3 years, it doesn't bother me anymore. You get an order, you do the job. That's it. No special fears, no anxiety about something happening. It's all become routine, day after day. You see the same landscapes, the same people, and you get used to it. The wow factor is gone. Now it just feels like any other job.
Yeah, you can clearly see it, especially in Mariupol. Many buildings were destroyed, but a lot have been rebuilt. And restoration is slowly continuing. As for places like Avdiivka or Bakhmut, we just don't go there anymore. They don't let us in. Donetsk is mostly intact, though there are still some hits on the outskirts and a few damaged buildings in the city. Mariupol was heavily destroyed, but we can enter now. In Luhansk region, places like Kreminna and Syeverodonetsk are only accessible with special passes, and I hear they're also heavily damaged.
This is Popasna, I'm telling you, and Lisichansk. These are cities that are about 70% destroyed. Popasna is almost completely wiped out. There's a small settlement on the way to Lisichansk, Novaya Tarzhkovka, and there's nothing left there at all. Everything is destroyed. A few locals still live in a couple of surviving houses, but that's it. The rest of the town is rubble, and from what I understand, people are still clearing it. It's not scary. It's just sad. Visiting it makes you feel down. Lately, when I go into Luhansk, I get depressed. I don't know why. It's so bleak and sad. Except for the new roads, there's nothing there that gives me any joy. It's just a depressing city. Gray. Like a 1990 city at best. My life is more important to me than any payments or salaries. I have 2 kids to raise. To some extent, I'm a patriot. Yes, I don't judge the authorities in that regard. But I don't want to fight. I feel safer at home, and my family does too.
The Insider's journalists continue their work despite pressure from Russian authorities. You can support them by liking this video, leaving a comment, and subscribing to our channel. If you'd like to further support their efforts, consider making a donation by clicking the link in the description below.